Hi, my name is Ben Dominichez. I'm an associate professor of political science here at the Catholic University of Korea's International Studies Department. And this is the Zoom recording of my presentation for my poster that I'm submitting for the Learner Conference scheduled virtually for about a week from now. So I'm uploading both a poster, which I will share a screen, and I will also upload this video presentation. I will, of course, just follow along with the poster in terms of the outline of my video presentation. So the proposal that I submitted, it seems like quite a while ago, was the Vietnam War and American nationalism, the institutionalization of stereotypes in the post-war U.S. foreign policymaking process. And I've developed, this theme in my research further since I submitted that proposal title and the synopsis. And so I've been developing it further, but it's part of an ongoing research agenda that I have in terms of trying to understand accurately what the Cold War was, because one of my continual emphases in my classes and in my work is that the prevailing view in Washington, D.C. is that the United States won the Cold War, and that means that the United States saved the world from Soviet imperialism, that the Soviet Union, to be quite succinct about it, was basically perceived in the prevailing view in Washington after World War II, was basically perceived as a Russian version of Nazi Germany. Of course, transferring from the experience of World War II, the prevailing view in the context of a political contestation in the United States, by the late 1940s, the dominant view within the Truman administration was that the Soviet Union wanted to do what basically Hitlerian Germany tried and failed to do, and that it was motivated to do that, and that it had a much greater opportunities to be successful, given that the world had just gone through the tremendously destructive Second World War, and the Soviet Union was a victor in that war. And in the course of fighting the Japanese on the east and the Germans on the west, the Soviet Union exploited those opportunities to spread communism as the ideology for basically Russian imperialism. That the Soviet Union had a much more appealing ideology than Nazi Germany obviously had, cloaking Russian expansionist imperialism in a more appealing symbol set involving socialism, decolonization, anti-imperialism, and as the justification for Soviet Russian expansionism. And this became the prevailing view in the United States, despite, of course, being allied with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany. And of course, given that the Soviet Union was a much more dangerous threat, given that by 1949 it developed its own nuclear weapons, that the United States no longer had a monopoly, obviously, on nuclear weapons. And so the Cold War was cold primarily because of the existence of the nuclear weapons, the nuclear setting. And that is one of the critical factors since 1945 in explaining the evolution and development of international relations behaviors that we see by great powers competing with each other for influence, for whatever the motivations for their competition in international relations, that they don't fight their wars directly with each other like they had in the past. If the Cold War had been occurring in a non-nuclear setting, there probably would have been a direct conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. In terms of the intensity of the conflict of the Cold War is quite intense. And so the great powers before the nuclear era would resolve their differences on the battlefield. That was not really an option as a conscious policy choice because it's basically suicidal in the nuclear setting. So the Soviet Union and the United States engaged in competitive interference in third countries. They fought their conflict indirectly. It was cold. The conflict was cold in terms of direct conflict, military violent conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union was avoided. But of course, millions of innocent people did die in the Cold War who were caught up in these conflicts in places in conflicts well known and not so well known. Korea, where I'm at, Vietnam, and in those cases, of course, you saw the United States become directly involved in a war against a perceived client or proxy state of the other superpower adversary, enemy. But of course, the United States intervened in Vietnam and Korea because of the perception that it was the communist superpowers' effort to expand its influence and control in the world indirectly through its clients and proxies, and Ho Chi Minh, Kim Il Sung, Mobutu Sese Seko, Patrice Lumumba in Congo, and Fidel Castro in Cuba, and Salvador Allende in Chile, and the list goes on. And so in this perceived intense danger and intense threat that the United States perceived as a nation state, it was more prone to engage in stereotyping of these perceived intense challenges. And stereotyping means a simplification of the essence or the foreign policy making process of the target state that you're perceiving, that we are perceiving as an intense threat, as a diabolical enemy, as an evil empire, as Ronald Reagan described it in his 1983 speech, the Evil Empire speech. It's a caricature. It's a caricature. Obviously, it's like Mordor in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There's no politics in Mordor. There's no politics in the most extreme versions of the diabolical enemy stereotype. There's just the will of Stalin, the will of Sauron Stalin, the elements of the Soviet communist, Soviet-led communist movement institute these incredibly rational conspiracies to spread communism and as reflected under Soviet control, as reflected in the dominant thinking in the United States that led to the tremendous mistake of Vietnam, obviously, that the Vietnam War involved certain assumptions that the Vietnamese were being directed or guided or made feasible as a communist national movement because of Soviet resources, Soviet direction, and the aid and direction of Soviet allies at the time, including as so perceived by China, and in this Manichaean worldview that developed about good versus evil, as John Foster Dulles described it, right? You can't be neutral when there's a struggle against good versus evil. How can you be neutral in the struggle against good, in the struggle of good versus evil, unless you're lying, unless somebody who claims they belong to the non-aligned movement, the neutral states, it cannot be. It's a trick, right? Is often the perceived elements of the diabolical enemy stereotype that these tremendous conspiracies in which and weaker actors are seen as weak, as unable to stand up to the might of the United States, for example. That the United States, once it intervenes in a country like Vietnam and gets rid of the troublemakers, taking directions from Moscow and its subalterns, then the United States will use its tremendous resources, its wealth, its capabilities to do in Vietnam what it supposedly did in South Korea. And of course, this means in the stereotyping of the world in terms of good versus evil, the free world versus the communist world, right? That pretty much summarizes it. The free world versus the totalitarian communist world. There's this Manichaean worldview that third forces, independent forces, keep in mind, this is because the United States was concerned, of course, that it had to fight in Korea and Vietnam for its own national self-defense. That, according to the domino theory, if Korea and Vietnam and Southeast Asia fall to communism, there will be dominoes that will spread to South Asia, Japan, eventually encouraging revolutions in Africa and Europe, and the United States will be an island surrounded by besieging forces. So the United States intervened and saw this intense threat to its own well-being that necessitated this intervention in Vietnam. But the point is that the United States became unable or unwilling to see as a prevailing view complexity in the form of Vietnamese nationalism or Chinese nationalism for that instance, that the United States didn't see the Sino-Soviet conflict until the 1960s, after the United States had already gotten deeply involved in Vietnam, so not see what John F. Kennedy evidently did see, independent third actors in the world, that is no longer just the Soviet Union communism versus American interests and influence, and so this inability to perceive nationalism, of course, led to the defeat of the United States in Vietnam. And then the American motivations for staying in Vietnam changed over the course of America's intervention there, with the realization did emerge that, of course, the United States had made a mistake, that it had allied with the aristocratic landowning Catholic elite in Vietnam against the national liberation movement that had adopted communism as its ideology for its strategy for victory of reunifying Vietnam. But then, by this point, the Americans had invested so many resources, including pride, including national identity, that the American motivation for staying in Vietnam then shifted to national grandeur, that we had to defeat Vietnam just to defeat it, to show that we are stronger than them, that we didn't want to be humiliated. And this, of course, is all very timely, given, by the way, I forgot to mention that this is the 50th anniversary of the publication of the Pentagon Papers, which has been noted much in the media, not to mention the New York Times, which published much of the Pentagon Papers, and that this okay, but in terms of how this is relevant for the present, it's the defeat in Vietnam contributed to the change in the United States with the rise of human rights as a foreign policy motivation under Jimmy Carter. And during the Carter presidency, the United States experienced other setbacks, including the Iran hostage crisis and other revolutionary forces moving forward in Africa and in Latin America, with Daniel Ortega, now an actor and now back as president, potential dictator in Nicaragua, and Ronald Reagan exploited this perception of humiliation to win the election and make Carter a one-term president in 1980. And then, of course, Reagan reinstituted America's commitment to the Cold War containment approach, boosted American defense spending, and then Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power in the Soviet Union and institutes a détente strategy towards the United States, making it very problematic, I think, to argue that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany. How could the Soviet system produce somebody like Mikhail Gorbachev? But a Cold War in the United States could say, well, of course, containment worked. That's why it worked, because the Soviet Union gave up because they knew they couldn't win, because Ronald Reagan and the Republicans, including young William Barr in the Reagan administration and others, had the will and determination to stand up to the Soviet Union. The neocon viewpoint, that this is the foundation of the neoconservative movement, that the United States needs to provide global leadership and must provide global, and did provide finally global leadership to defeat the Soviet Union, save the world from the Russian version of Nazi Germany. And therefore the institutions here that we have in the present, 30 years since the end of the Cold War, are still preserved. NATO was formed during the Cold War to contain the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is gone. Of course, the NATO under American leadership, the assumption is should be continued and expanded into Eastern Europe. because and part of the justification for all of these efforts is that the United States was the force for freedom and democracy during the Cold War, and through its leadership preserved freedom, capitalism, and liberal political and economic liberalism for the world, and that it must continue to provide this leadership. And so, and in this the sense of victory, the Vietnam was just a losing battle in the long Cold War that the Americans eventually won, because what was said about the British, right? The British military history, that the only battle that counts in war is the last one, and so the prevailing view is, because it's self-serving. There's lots of vested economic interests in the United States. There's economic vested interests, political vested interests, vast vested interests built up during the Cold War that institutionalize these attitudes that the United States must and does and can and should provide leadership, because it's human nature to perceive the political world, including perceive threats and opportunities in self-serving ways in terms of pursuing and satisfying my interests and needs. As social psychologists, going all the way back to Sigmund Freud as the founder of psychoanalysis, who first started writing and exploring. So, and so that is partly the explanation for the rise of Donald Trump as a manifestation of these increasing nationalistic tendencies in the United States, along with polarization. You saw, for example, in the January 6th insurrection in the Capitol, that there was a protester or demonstrator or rioter waving a South Vietnamese flag. Remember that this was reminding us about how the sensitivity of the Vietnam War and the desire not to believe that it was a mistake, because it's humiliating to believe that we would lose 56,000 soldiers and many thousands wounded, and not to mention the hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese casualties, that it didn't serve a noble cause, as Ronald Reagan described the Vietnam War. And so, of course, the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, and of course, the United States is a force for peace. Now, in terms of the Trump administration's claim about America first, I mean, we didn't see a withdrawal of the United States under Donald Trump. I mean, we still, in his first budget when he was president in 2017, boosted defense spending by 10%. Beyond what it was under the last year of Barack Obama. Trump administration did negotiate a withdrawal from Afghanistan, but we have to see if they're really going to withdraw. I don't know what withdrawal really means. Even now, I mean, they're talking about keeping 650 American soldiers in Kabul airport, Kabul, to protect the embassy. And so these nationalistic forces or trends underway in the United States go beyond any particular individual. They are a reflection of American nationalism, American national identity, together with vast vested interests that were created as bureaucracies to implement the containment strategy of the United States over 45 years. That it consumed trillions of dollars and employ millions and millions of people and fund projects, including academic research and the like, that have vested their interest in America's worldview regarding why America is involved in the world and how to legitimate America's involvement in the world. That it defeated the Russian version of Nazi Germany. So. And that grandeur element, was reflected by Richard Nixon, right? When Richard Nixon won the election in 1968, he said that it's North Vietnam. In one of his speeches, he states that North Vietnam cannot defeat the United States. Only Americans can do that. So those Americans opposing the war, those Americans opposing, demonstrating, protesting. Are a source of weakness, are a source of degeneracy that undermining in this worldview, America's ability to enforce its will. And in terms of reflecting that national grandeur motivation, came to dominate U.S. motivations for fighting in Vietnam at the end of the Vietnam War. As continued or as intensified over the years since the Nixon administration. So that's where I'll conclude, and I will upload this video presentation for viewing next week. Thank you.